In the beginning, humanity was not born into darkness, we fell into it. The story most of us were told ends at the gates of Eden, but an ancient manuscript, hidden for centuries, continues where Genesis stops. It tells of what really happened after the light faded and why the first humans were never meant to forget what they lost. As the gates of paradise closed, a radiance brighter than the sun vanished before Adam and Eve's eyes. The ground trembled. The sound of wings, those of the cherubim guarding Eden, echoed like thunder. They turned, hoping the garden would reopen. It didn't. The book says they stood there for 7 days, motionless, as if turned to stone. Their tears watered the dust of the new earth, and the voice of the Lord was silent. For the first time, the two beings who once walked with angels felt hunger. The wind burned. The night terrified them. They had never seen darkness. In the absence of divine light, they believed the world was ending. But it wasn't. It was only beginning. Or perhaps it was beginning again. When the first sunrise came, they collapsed to their knees in awe, believing God had returned. But a shadow watched from a distance. It was the same presence that had whispered in Eden, the one now cast to wander in bitterness. The book calls him the one who envied the light. He vowed to make humanity his experiment. As Adam and Eve searched for food, a being appeared before them in a form of fire and light. He told them the Creator had forgiven them and invited them back to paradise. Overjoyed, they followed him to a high mountain. "Jump," he said, "and you shall be carried by angels." They stepped forward. The earth rushed upward. Pain exploded through their bodies. They realized too late, it was not God's angel. It was the deceiver. What if Satan could still appear in light? How many times since then has humanity mistaken him for salvation? The ancient text describes how God's word descended again, healing their wounds and rebuking the deceiver. "The one who fell will tempt you until the end," the voice warned. "But through your suffering, the world will be redeemed." Adam and Eve bowed, trembling. They were no longer divine beings. They were mortal prototypes of redemption itself. Night returned. This time they did not panic, but they wept again. The light of Eden had been within them, and now it flickered like a fading ember. Eve whispered, "Will we ever see him again?" Adam answered, "Not until the time appointed." The book says an angel placed a crystal stone beside them, a fragment of Eden's soil, to remind them of the promise. Days passed. They learned to grind seeds and dig wells. The text claims they built the first altar of stone, not to ask for food, but forgiveness. Above them, unseen eyes watched. The deceiver had not given up. He appeared again, this time disguised as a serpent coiled around a branch. "You think he forgave you," he hissed. "You were replaced. You were forgotten." What if humanity's greatest enemy isn't outside us at all, but the voice that convinces us we are already abandoned? Adam cried out in anger, striking the serpent with a stick. The creature vanished, leaving only a black mark on the ground. A scar, the book says, remained for generations. Eve fell to her knees, afraid that the curse would never end. But the angelic voice returned, telling them, "Every time you resist him, the heavens record your strength." Then something extraordinary happened. The book says Adam and Eve began to glow faintly, their skin emitting the last remnants of the divine light. It was fading, but still visible. The radiance lasted 7 days before it disappeared completely. From that moment on, humanity would have to seek light through spirit, not flesh. They spent 40 days fasting, praying for the gates of Eden to reopen. Nothing happened, but on the 40th night, a column of fire appeared in the sky and hovered over the mountain east of Eden. The voice of God's word told them, "When your children seek me, they will find me on this mountain." It was the first prophecy of redemption, Mount of the Skull, where light would one day return through sacrifice. Could this hidden prophecy be the first record of the crucifixion, written thousands of years before the New Testament? As the couple grew older, they learned the rhythm of creation: day, night, seed time, harvest. Yet they still feared one thing: death. In the garden, they had seen no decay. Now they watched plants wither and animals fall. Eve asked, "Will we also die?" Adam answered, "If death came to all things, then it will come for us." Satan appeared once more, disguised as a young man carrying fruit. "Eat," he said, "and you will not die." Adam refused. The stranger smiled. "Then why did he cast you out? If he loved you, would he have hidden life behind a flaming sword?" Then the figure vanished into smoke. Adam fell to the ground, crying, "He will not stop until we forget who we are." The book says God sent two radiant beings to teach them protection rituals: fasting, prayer, and anointing with oil from the fig tree. These were not punishments. They were reminders that suffering would become the pathway to restoration. Was humanity's pain part of a design, a sacred initiation rather than a curse? Eve later gave birth to Cain and Abel. The text portrays Cain not merely as jealous, but as one born of the shadow. It hints that the deceiver had whispered to Eve before conception, planting pride in her heart. Cain grew strong and cunning, Abel gentle and faithful. When their offerings were made, only Abel's rose in fragrance. Cain's heart burned with envy, and the dark voice returned, "Take what is yours." The killing is described not as rage but as possession. His eyes turned to black fire, the text says. After Abel's death, Eve tore her clothes, weeping over the ground. Adam buried Abel in the cave, later known as the Cave of Treasures. Over the body, he swore to guard the secret of humanity's destiny until the promised Redeemer came. If the first murder was guided by a voice not of this world, has that same voice been whispering through every war and empire since? As the story closes for this section, the couple stand before the cave. The angel of the Lord appears and says, "The breath you lost in Eden will be returned, but not yet. For the light that left you must be born again in the flesh." Adam looks up, asking, "How long?" The answer, "Until the stars bow before man." Darkness falls. The book ends this portion with Adam's words, "We are exiles, but not abandoned." The wind rises again, carrying the echo of distant wings, the watchers still guarding what once was ours. What if the true Eden was never a place at all, but a state of consciousness humanity is destined to rediscover? Generations passed, and the children of Adam and Eve multiplied across the valley east of Eden. Yet every child born carried a trace of that lost radiance, a memory of the garden etched into their souls. They built homes from stone, learned to cultivate wheat and grapes, but their hearts remained restless. The old stories say that at night, Adam would climb the highest hill and gaze toward the glowing western horizon, where the flaming sword still shimmered. He would whisper, "It still burns for us." The book describes how, long after Abel's death, Adam was haunted by dreams of the deceiver walking among his descendants. He saw cities of fire, towers rising toward heaven, and wars fought in the name of false gods. When he awoke, he wept, saying, "The voice has found its way into our blood." Could these dreams have been visions of the future? A warning of humanity's endless cycle of rebellion and return? Eve, too, was tormented by visions. She saw her children arguing over land, gold, and power, and she cried out, "Have they forgotten we were born from the same breath?" an angel appeared in her dream, telling her, "Your grief will echo until the day a woman bears the light again." That promise, the prophecy of a redeemer born of woman, became the heartbeat of all later faiths. But few know that it originated here in this banned text. As their children grew, Adam tried to teach them the rituals the angels had shown him, how to fast, how to pray facing the rising sun, how to guard their thoughts from the whisperer. But one by one, the younger generations forgot. They grew fascinated by strange lights that moved in the night sky. The book says they called them the Watchers, believing these beings could restore what was lost. But not all who descended were messengers of light. One night, a blinding radiance appeared above the mountain. Adam fell to the ground, covering his face. Voices like rushing water echoed through the valley. "Do not look," he warned his children. But some disobeyed. When they looked, they saw beings of shining countenance clothed in metallic fire, speaking in a language of thunder. The book implies these were the same Watchers later described in the Book of Enoch, angels who taught forbidden arts to humankind. Was this the true beginning of the knowledge humanity was never meant to hold? After the vision faded, Adam told his children, "Do not worship what glows. Worship what breathes." Yet many were already tempted. They built shrines where the light had touched the ground. Generations later, those shrines became the first temples of idols. Humanity, barely born, had already begun to forget its creator. In his final years, Adam withdrew into a cave high above the valley. The book calls it the Cave of Treasures, for inside he stored the relics of Eden, a fragment of the crystal soil, a jar of oil from the fig tree, and a robe of light woven by the angels. He told his eldest son, Seth, "Guard these until the promise is fulfilled." He believed these objects carried frequencies of divine origin, keys to reopen the bridge between worlds. Could these relics still exist, hidden beneath layers of earth and myth? One evening, Adam heard the familiar whisper again. It said, "You were made from dust, and to dust you will return." "But I was made of fire," Adam answered, "then burn forever alone." The shadow laughed, fading into the darkness. The text says that moment marked the true death of fear in mankind. From then on, humanity would face its tempter not as victims, but as warriors of light bound to flesh. Adam's health began to fail. He called for Eve and his children. "The light within me grows dim," he said. "But before I go, Shel, I will tell you a secret." They gathered around him, torches flickering on the cave walls. He spoke of the promise given by the angel, that one day the Creator's word would take flesh and restore the fallen spark. "From our line will come the one who defeats the deceiver," he whispered. "Do not forget this when the world is dark." Moments before his death, Adam raised his hands and said, "I see the light again." The book describes the sky opening and a beam descending upon the cave. For a heartbeat, his body glowed as it had in Eden. Then it faded, leaving behind a fragrance sweeter than any flower. The angels sealed the Cave of Treasures, declaring it a sanctuary for the souls of the righteous. Eve fell beside him crying, "Do not leave me in the shadow." A voice answered, "You will sleep until the light awakens you." Centuries later, Adam's descendants rediscovered the cave. They found it guarded by two luminous beings who warned them not to enter until the appointed time. Some claim those guardians were the same Watchers who once defied heaven, now condemned to stand sentinel until redemption unfolds. If true, that would mean humanity's story is still being watched, still being guided or tested by unseen forces. The text takes a strange turn here. It describes a group of Adam's distant offspring who settled in the mountains and began experimenting with the elements of heaven. They learned to draw power from stones that glowed when struck together and used this light to build weapons of thunder. The manuscript says, "They became like the stars that fell." Could this be an allegory or evidence of lost pre-flood technology buried under the myths of angels and giants? The book ends this section with Eve's final vision. In her dream, she saw a new Eden. Not a garden, but a city floating in the sky, radiant with living light. She heard a voice say, "The exile is only the first chapter. The return will shake the heavens." Then she awoke, smiled faintly, and closed her eyes forever. What if that vision wasn't symbolic at all, but a memory of a civilization that once walked among the stars? The narrative fades with a promise. Those who remember the first exile will live to see the second dawn. It hints that the fall of humanity was not a punishment, but preparation. That the knowledge lost in Eden would one day return in full, transforming flesh back into light. And perhaps, buried deep within these forbidden pages, lies the oldest conspiracy of all. That the book of Adam and Eve wasn't about two people at all, but about us. After the death of Adam and Eve, their children scattered across the land. Some remained faithful to the ancient covenant, preserving the rituals and the memory of the light. Others, seduced by strange powers, drifted into the shadows of the mountains where the Watchers once descended. There, they built altars of stone that glowed faintly at night, saying they could feel the breath of the gods within them. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps they had rediscovered what their father had hidden. Generations passed. The descendants of Seth, those who still honored the Creator, became known as the Children of the Light. But even they began to change. The book says that after 7 generations, they grew curious about the daughters of Cain, who lived in the lower plains. The women were beautiful, their cities filled with music and fire. The sons of Seth descended to them, and in doing so, the world crossed a threshold it could never return from. If the fallen angels corrupted mankind in Enoch's time, perhaps it began much earlier through the union of bloodlines divided by belief. The ancient manuscript describes how, after these unions, children were born who were larger, stronger, and far more intelligent than any before them. Some revered God, but most hungered for power. They discovered the remnants of the Watcher's craft, metallic spheres that hummed when touched, tablets that glowed with inscriptions that no one could read. The book says they called them the orbs of heaven. Scholars dismiss this as myth. Yet thousands of years later, 2 mysterious metallic spheres, the Betz and Buka spheres, would display the same behavior described here. Could humanity have rediscovered artifacts from this ancient era? These hybrid offspring built great cities, and for a time, peace reigned. But pride returned. They began experimenting with the fire of the stars, a power that could move mountains. The Creator warned them through dreams and storms, but they would not listen. Then, one night, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. The book says a voice thundered from the sky. The covenant is broken. The next morning, the ground split open. Rivers boiled. The ancient mountain of light, where the cave of treasures lay hidden, began to collapse. The faithful fled to the highlands, carrying the relics Adam had sealed away. Among them was Seth, old and wise, holding the crystal stone given to his father at the gates of Eden. He shouted, "The time of cleansing has begun." The manuscript claims this was the first great flood, a regional cataclysm that prefigured the deluge of Noah's day. Did multiple civilizations fall long before the one we call the first? When the storms ended, a remnant of humanity remained. They opened the cave of treasures again, now half buried beneath rock and ash. Inside, they found Adam's relics untouched, still glowing faintly. They prayed for guidance, and a voice echoed within the chamber. "Hide these until the appointed time. For from the seed of man will come the light that was lost." They sealed the cave once more, believing angels would guard it until the final age. Could this be the same mountain the ancients later called Sinai, or even Golgotha, the hill where the prophecy would unfold? Centuries turned into millennia, civilizations rose and fell, but the story of Adam and Eve never disappeared. It changed names, languages, and symbols. Some called it the War of Heaven, others the Dawn of Flesh. The same story, rewritten by scribes who only half remembered what the first humans knew in full. Every culture speaks of a lost paradise, a serpent, a fall, and a coming restoration. Is it possible that all of them are fragments of this original banned text? Hidden deep within the book of Adam and Eve are passages that describe the future of humankind. One verse reads, "In the end, those who are flesh will become flame, and the earth will give up her shadows." Some interpret this as resurrection, others as transformation. Could it refer to a time when humanity reclaims its original form, beings of light no longer bound to matter? The manuscript also warns of a final deception. It says that before the return of the light, the deceiver will once again appear as a being of radiance, performing wonders to convince the world that the exile has ended. He will wear the face of wisdom, it says, and his words will open the gates, but not to Eden, to the abyss. If true, it suggests that even enlightenment can be counterfeited. Humanity's test will not be belief or disbelief, but discernment. Toward its final pages, the tone shifts from narrative to prophecy. Eve's voice returns through vision. She speaks to her descendants. "You were not punished, you were prepared. For the seed planted in sorrow will bloom in glory." She describes a final dawn when the world will no longer orbit darkness but light, when death will no longer be feared because it will be understood. Could this be the ancient origin of the resurrection doctrine, the moment when death itself becomes the doorway back to Eden? Then, one final mystery. The last paragraph claims that the Cave of Treasures was never destroyed. It remains sealed under an eastern mountain, guarded by watchers who await the awakening of humanity's divine memory. When the sons of dust remember who they are, the book concludes, the earth will open and reveal what was hidden. That line has haunted scholars for centuries. What if this cave, described in one of the world's oldest forbidden texts, is not myth at all, but an actual vault waiting to be rediscovered? The story ends where it began, with the promise that humanity's exile was never permanent. The gates of Eden may have closed, but the path back was hidden within the human heart. The book's final words are almost a whisper. The light will return through those who seek it. And somewhere, perhaps beneath ancient rock or in the forgotten chambers of memory, that light still waits? What if the fall of man was never the end, but the beginning of a journey back to godhood?